I want you to do something unusual before I begin this briefing. I want you to clear your mind of everything you have read in the headlines today. Forget the individual stories. Forget the specific details of each crisis. And instead, I want you to zoom out, far out, and look at the last 48 hours of American foreign policy as a single, unified picture. What you will see is this. On Friday evening, the United States military launched one of the most significant military operations in decades, striking approximately 140 Iranian military targets across the country. The Pentagon described it as a necessary response to Iranian attacks on commercial shipping. The White House called it a demonstration of American resolve. Donald Trump declared that the United States would, in his words, take over the Strait of Hormuz. Then, within hours, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps launched a coordinated retaliatory strike. Ballistic missiles and suicide drones flew simultaneously toward American military installations in 5 separate countries: Jordan, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, the United Arab Emirates. 5 nations, one night. The most geographically dispersed attack on American military assets since the Second World War. And then, in the middle of all of this, while the Pentagon was still assessing the damage to its bases and the markets were in free fall, the United States Senate received the news that Senator Lindsey Graham, the chairman of the Senate Budget Committee, the most consistent and powerful advocate for Ukraine funding in all of Washington, had died. He was 71 years old. He had returned from Kyiv just days before. 2 fronts, 48 hours. And the United States has no answer for either of them. Today I am going to explain exactly what this moment means. I am going to introduce a framework I call the two-front collapse, a doctrine that explains how empires do not fall in a single dramatic battle. They collapse slowly, and then all at once, when the weight of overextension on multiple simultaneous fronts exceeds the political will to sustain them. What happened this weekend was not a coincidence. It was the mathematics of strategic overextension finally coming due, and the invoice is catastrophic. To understand the full devastation of this 48-hour window, you must first understand the doctrine Washington was operating under before the weekend began. For decades, American military and foreign policy doctrine has been built on a concept called escalation dominance. The premise is straightforward. In any confrontation, the United States must always be able to escalate the conflict to a higher level of intensity than its adversary is willing or able to match. The adversary, knowing they cannot compete at the higher level, will back down. The United States wins without fighting. This is the logic that produced the decision to strike 140 Iranian military targets. Washington calculated that a massive, overwhelming strike, taking out radar systems, missile batteries, ammunition depots, naval vessels, would so devastate the Iranian military's capacity for retaliation that Tehran would be forced to stand down. The message was supposed to be, America can hit you 140 times in a single night. What can you possibly do in response? Tehran answered that question immediately, and the answer dismantled the entire doctrine of escalation dominance in a single night. Iran did not attempt to match American military power. Iran did not launch a mass strike on a single American target. Instead, they dispersed their retaliation across 5 countries simultaneously. They struck Jordan, they struck Kuwait, they struck Bahrain, they struck Qatar, they struck the UAE. Small to medium strikes, coordinated in time, designed not to cause maximum physical destruction, but to achieve something far more devastating: maximum psychological and political destruction. The message Iran sent with that 5-country simultaneous strike was not, "We can match your power." The message was, "We can reach everywhere." There is no safe corner of the American military architecture in the Middle East. Your bases, your troops, and your allies are all within our reach simultaneously. Escalation dominance requires that you can threaten something your adversary values enough that they will back down. Iran just demonstrated that what America values most in the Middle East, its network of forward bases, is no longer protected by the doctrine. The doctrine is dead. Stage 1. The 140 strike gamble and its hidden cost. Let us examine the American strike more carefully, because the decision to hit 140 targets simultaneously tells us something critical about the state of Washington's strategic thinking. 140 targets. The number sounds overwhelming. It sounds like the kind of firepower that should end a crisis, not escalate it. But military power is not just measured in the number of targets destroyed. It is measured in the strategic objective achieved. And what strategic objective did 140 strikes accomplish? The strikes did not end Iran's ability to threaten shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. Iran has redundant, deeply buried mobile missile systems that survive the strikes. The IRGC's small boat fleet, which is the primary tool for harassing commercial shipping, dispersed into coastal inlets before the strikes began. They are already re-emerging. The strikes did not change Iran's political calculus. The Iranian supreme leader emerged the following morning and declared that the strikes had awakened the spirit of resistance. Whether or not you believe that rhetoric, the political reality is identical. Tehran is not backing down. And critically, the strikes did not prevent the retaliatory missile attacks on American bases. The entire premise of striking 140 targets preemptively was to degrade Iran's capacity to retaliate. Within hours of the strikes concluding, American service members in 5 different countries were running for bunkers. So what did 140 strikes actually accomplish? They accomplished something Washington did not intend. They proved to every nation in the world, every ally, every adversary, every neutral observer, that the United States can inflict enormous pain on Iran, and Iran will absorb that pain and continue fighting. That is not a demonstration of American strength. That is a demonstration that America's conventional military superiority does not translate into political control. And when the adversary demonstrates they can absorb your most powerful punch and keep swinging, you have not won. You have simply revealed your ceiling. Stage 2. The 5-base retaliation and what it really means. Now let us examine the Iranian response in the same analytical framework. Iran launched simultaneous strikes on U.S. military facilities in Jordan, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, and the UAE. Let me explain why this specific targeting pattern is a stroke of strategic genius, not because of the physical damage it caused, but because of the political message it delivered. Each of those 5 nations is a different kind of American ally, with a different kind of political relationship with Washington. And by striking all 5 simultaneously, Iran sent 5 different messages with a single operation. In Jordan, Iran struck fuel tanks and ammunition depots at Prince Hassan Air Base. Jordan is one of America's most reliable and publicly cooperative Arab allies. By striking Jordan, Iran is warning Amman, your alliance with Washington has made you a target. The King of Jordan now has to explain to his domestic population why hosting American troops is costing Jordanian lives. In Kuwait, Iran struck Ali al-Salam and Ahmed al-Jaber air bases, critical nodes in the American logistics network. Kuwait has never forgotten that Iran's proxies in Iraq have long threatened Kuwaiti sovereignty. By striking Kuwait directly, Iran is escalating that threat from implicit to explicit. The Kuwaiti government is now under enormous domestic pressure to reconsider its relationship with American military forces. In Bahrain, Iran struck U.S. military facilities and a drone command center. Bahrain is home to the U.S. Navy's 5th Fleet. A strike on Bahrain is a strike at the heart of American naval power projection in the Persian Gulf. Iran is demonstrating that the flagship of American power in the region is not out of reach. In Qatar, Iran targeted facilities near Al Udeid, the largest American air base in the Middle East. Qatar was serving as a peace mediator just weeks ago. Now it is a combat zone. The message to Doha is devastating. No amount of diplomatic neutrality protects you when you host American military hardware. And in the UAE, Iran struck what reports describe as multiple military and infrastructure sites. The UAE has been positioning itself as a technologically advanced, modern Gulf state, slightly distancing itself from the regional conflict. Iran just shattered that neutrality. 5 nations, 5 different political messages, 1 coordinated operation. This is what the defense theorists call multi-domain coercion. Iran did not just fight the United States military. It simultaneously threatened 5 separate governments, forcing each of them to calculate whether their alliance with Washington is worth the direct physical attacks they are now absorbing. The math is getting very difficult for the Gulf leaders, and Washington does not have a convincing answer for any of them. I must now turn to the second front, because as devastating as the Middle East escalation is, the death of Lindsey Graham represents a different kind of catastrophic loss, one that is invisible to the casual observer, but absolutely crippling to anyone who understands how Washington actually functions. Senator Lindsey Graham was not famous for his legislative mastery or his policy innovations. He was famous for something far rarer in modern Washington: absolute, unwavering, bipartisan commitment to a single cause across multiple administrations, multiple Congresses, and multiple political climates. That cause was Ukraine. For years, before Ukraine was politically popular, when most of the Republican Party had little interest in European security commitments, Lindsey Graham was in Kyiv. He was sitting across from President Zelensky. He was building the personal, institutional relationships that eventually made it possible for the Senate to approve package after package of military and economic support for Ukraine. Graham was not just a supporter. He was the converter. He was the senator who could walk into a closed-door Republican caucus meeting, sit down next to a senator from a rural state who had never cared about European geography, and within 45 minutes have that senator convinced that Ukraine's survival was essential to American national security. That skill, the ability to personally lobby and convert skeptical members, is not a policy position that can be replaced by a memo. It is a human capability that took decades to develop. It lived inside one specific person, and that person is gone. Lindsey Graham died after returning from a trip to Kyiv. He spent his final professional days doing what he had done for years, standing in the Ukrainian capital, pledging American support, trying to hold the coalition together. And now the coalition faces its most dangerous moment without its most essential architect. Let us be precise about the political mathematics of what Graham's death means for Ukraine. The United States Senate is closely divided. Ukraine funding has never been unanimously popular. In recent months, the combination of the Middle East crisis absorbing enormous defense budget attention, the political fatigue around an extended conflict, and the growing isolationist wing of the Republican Party has made every Ukraine funding vote increasingly difficult to pass. Graham was the bridge. He was the person who could talk to the isolationists in the language of American national interest. He could talk to the hawks in the language of deterrence. He could talk to the moderates in the language of historical responsibility. Without him, who bridges those factions? The names being floated as potential replacements, other senior senators who might take up the Ukraine cause, simply do not have the relationships, the credibility, or the personal history with Ukrainian leadership that Graham spent years building. They are starting from a significant deficit, and Russia knows this. Whatever your theory of Graham's death, whether you accept the official explanation of an aortic dissection or you believe in something more sinister, the geopolitical reality is identical. Russia's most tireless and effective enemy in the United States Senate is gone. The Kremlin does not need to have caused this to benefit from it enormously. The timing, Graham dying at the exact moment when Ukraine needs its Senate champion most, just as the Middle East crisis is consuming the oxygen in every foreign policy discussion in Washington, is the kind of convergence that changes the course of history. Now I must address the institutional blind spot that produced this moment of total simultaneous exposure. For the last several years, American foreign policy elites have been operating on a doctrine that can be summarized in 4 words: we can do everything. We can simultaneously contain China in the Pacific. We can arm Ukraine against Russia in Europe. We can maintain air and naval dominance in the Middle East against Iran. We can sanction adversaries across 3 different theaters. We can negotiate peace in Switzerland while conducting airstrikes from the Persian Gulf. The doctrine of we can do everything is the defining arrogance of a unipolar superpower that has not yet fully reckoned with the reality that it is no longer unipolar. China, Russia, and Iran did not form a formal military alliance. There is no treaty, there is no joint command structure, there is no coordinated battle plan signed by their 3 leaders. But they do not need one. They share a single, common objective: the reduction of American power to a level where none of them can be individually threatened, sanctioned, or coerced by Washington. And they have discovered, through years of careful observation, that the most efficient way to achieve that objective is not to fight America directly. It is to engage America simultaneously on multiple fronts, each individually manageable, but collectively exhausting. Drain the treasury, drain the political will, drain the institutional memory, as Graham's death has now literally done. This is the hidden architecture of what we are watching, not a conspiracy, a convergence of interests, and a convergence that Washington's "we can do everything" doctrine was never designed to handle. The institutional blind spot of the American foreign policy machine is that it optimizes for each crisis individually. The Middle East team handles the Middle East. The Europe team handles Ukraine. They brief in separate rooms. They testify in separate committees. They fight for separate budget lines. But adversaries do not read those internal organizational charts. They see a single, overextended system, and they apply pressure everywhere at once. 3 predictions. Prediction 1. Ukraine funding will face its most serious threat in Congress within the next 90 days. Without Graham, the Republican coalition behind Ukraine assistance is structurally weakened. The isolationist wing, which has always been looking for a reason to redirect those funds to domestic priorities or to the Middle East, will now move aggressively. Expect a prolonged and ugly budget fight that will delay or reduce the next Ukraine package significantly. Russia will time its next major offensive to coincide with this funding gap. Prediction 2. At least one Gulf state will formally request the removal or significant reduction of American military forces from its soil within the next 6 months. The 5-country Iranian missile strike has fundamentally changed the domestic political calculus for every Gulf government hosting U.S. bases. They signed up to host American troops as a deterrent against Iran. They are now discovering that hosting those troops has made them primary targets for Iranian missiles. The cost-benefit analysis has inverted. Watch Bahrain or Kuwait make the first move. Prediction 3. Iran will not negotiate seriously for the remainder of 2026. Why would they? They have just demonstrated that their missiles can hit American bases in 5 countries simultaneously. They have watched Washington absorb both a domestic political loss and a regional military humiliation in a single weekend. They have calculated, correctly, that Washington's political bandwidth for a prolonged confrontation is at an all-time low. They will wait, they will strengthen their position, and they will negotiate from an even stronger position in 2027. Your homework number 1. Look up the concept of imperial overstretch, a theory developed by the historian Paul Kennedy in his work on the rise and fall of great powers. Kennedy's central argument is that great powers fall not because they are defeated by a single stronger enemy, but because they spread their military and economic commitments across too many theaters simultaneously until the cost of maintaining those commitments exceeds the resources available to fund them. Map what you see happening this weekend onto Kennedy's framework. The pattern will be unmistakable. Homework number 2. Research the specific voting record of Lindsey Graham on Ukraine-related legislation over the last 5 years. Then identify which Republican senator is now the most likely successor to his role as the Ukraine coalition's chief builder. Examine that senator's relationships with the Ukrainian government, their fundraising connections, and their stated positions on foreign aid. You will discover very quickly that there is no natural successor. The institutional knowledge Graham carried is simply gone. Homework number 3. Draw a map of the 5 countries where Iran struck American military targets this weekend. Then draw a line connecting those 5 countries. You will discover that Iran has effectively demonstrated strike capability across the entire geographic arc of the American military presence in the Middle East. From Jordan in the northwest to the UAE in the southeast, no American base is beyond Iranian reach. This changes every military planning assumption the Pentagon has operated under for the last 2 decades. Empires do not fall on the day they are defeated. They fall on the day they are revealed. For 70 years, the American empire rested on 2 foundations. The first was military, the unshakable belief, held by friends and enemies alike, that American forces could project overwhelming power anywhere on Earth and absorb any retaliation without breaking. The second was political, the belief that the American political system would always produce the institutional will to sustain its global commitments regardless of the political winds. This weekend, both foundations cracked simultaneously. In the Persian Gulf, Iran struck American bases in 5 countries in a single night, proving that the military foundation, the promise of overwhelming deterrence, is no longer sufficient to prevent coordinated, multi-theater retaliation. In Washington, the sudden death of Lindsey revealed how dangerously thin the political foundation has become. The entire Senate coalition supporting Ukraine, painstakingly constructed over years of personal diplomacy, resided in the mind and relationships of a single 71-year-old man. And when that man is gone, the coalition begins to dissolve. America has not lost a war this weekend. Its aircraft carriers are still sailing. Its nuclear arsenal is still intact. Its economy, though strained, is still the largest on Earth. But something more important than any of those material assets has been damaged. The perception of invulnerability, the psychological certainty that every American ally and every American adversary carries in their calculations, has taken a wound that no amount of press conferences, no amount of emergency diplomatic tours, and no amount of additional airstrikes can fully repair. The world is watching Washington absorb 2 catastrophic blows in 48 hours, and the most dangerous nations in that world are taking notes. I'll see you in the next briefing.